I'm Connor Wold, and welcome back to the last episode of Forgotten Oscar Films. And I can't believe we're near the end, but if you're new to the series, what I do every single week is I look at a film that was nominated for Best Picture that I think has been forgotten, one that's been lost to time in terms of recommendations or general film quality and film culture. I talk about the sort of 5 nominees and the Oscar history, because I think it's crucial to understand why a film was nominated, why it was seen as one of the 5 best of the year, but maybe has been less so over the years. I also give my thoughts on the film, because for a lot of these films I'm seeing them for the very first time, and I also give, just try to answer that central question as to why it hasn't been remembered, why this film has not been remembered versus, say, some of the other nominees. Is it have to do with quality, or does it have to do for other reasons as well? But I can't believe we're just sort of at the top. We'll talk about a little bit, this is the end of the series. Next week we're going to be jumping back into the Oscar season, like always. Should be following a similar format, but I'm going to try to be doing some unique stuff with just the quality of the videos in general, maybe a little bit more editing, see how that works out. But I've really enjoyed the series overall. It's a series that I don't think I'm going to continue, just because I knew it was going to be sort of limited, because I guess we can go further back into the 30s and 20s, but that's where really a lot of my film knowledge has dissipated. Plus, those films are really harder to find, especially if we get into the 60s and the 50s. Even some of these films are hard to find just on streaming. A lot of times I rent the movies, but even then it's hard to find. So I don't think that series would necessarily work well going forward. However, despite that, I really have enjoyed the series. It has been a total masterclass, just researching and understanding the Oscar history and why films succeed and why films are sort of remembered, or how the Oscars sort of work are different back then, but they do today. But even still, I learned a lot just learning from history that I think I can bring to my Oscar videos come the future, which I'm very glad about. And this has really just been a lesson for myself, looking back at all these films and really understanding more about the history of films in general. But with that out of the way, I do want to say I really enjoyed this series, and I hope you enjoyed it too. And if you want, comment below. Let me know your favorite episode and what kind of series you'd like to see me do. Maybe post Oscars. I have sort of an idea, especially maybe that's a little bit more modern. We've always been doing some of these classic kind of things. Maybe a little bit more modern will be interesting to do. But I plan on continuing this channel, and I hope you continue to watch. But starting off with the first nominee here, we have Around the World in 80 Days, and this one maybe would have been the actual obvious choice, because it is. I haven't seen the movie, but it's sort of notorious for being one of the worst Best Picture winners, if not the worst Best Picture winner. I've never heard really anyone say anything great about it or defend it. It's almost a unanimous sort of person that movie that people just don't like. I'm sure it's maybe dated in that sense, but the real reason actually why I didn't choose this one was because that actually it was remade in sort of 2004, I believe, with Jackie Chan. So when I was growing up, I sort of knew about the film. I've heard about it. So, for my generation, a lot of ways, I actually have heard about this film. I haven't seen it, but at least heard about it. And then once you learn more about film culture, you learn about, of course, Cecil B. DeMille Award at the Golden Globes. Who's Cecil B. DeMille? Oh, he won Best Picture at the Oscars for Around the World in 80 Days. I mean, there are certain things that will keep this film remembered and have a legacy, despite it being sort of seen as one of the worst. And maybe that's its legacy, is that it is the worst Best Picture winner, but I don't want to say that because I haven't seen the movie myself. That being said, this was actually the same year as the Alfie remake, 2004. So another Best Picture winner that we didn't cover because it's been remade. So in a lot of ways, if it's not that forgotten, if it's been remade. So I didn't want to choose that one. Although it did eventually win Best Picture, and a bit of not a surprise at the time, but over the years, maybe a film that has been less and less appreciated for its quality. But another film that maybe looking back should have won would have been Giant, and this is from director George Stevens, who we talked about on the Room at the Top episode, because his film The Diary of Anne Frank was nominated. This is definitely seen as maybe one of his best, especially in his post World War II sort of career. A long, epic western that has great performance from Liz Taylor, really sort of kind of a breakout in a lot of ways, because this is before something like Cat on a Hot Tin Roof, or the sort of media phenomenon that she sort of had with Cleopatra, and then of course also has Rock Hudson in this as well. Sort of this long, epic movie, sort of seen at least within film culture as a giant, no pun intended, of quality, of length. And when I think of this, sort of these big, long, prestige-y kind of 50s epics that are 3 hours plus, that are symbolize maybe quality and symbolize some layers, I think of a movie like Giant. The next nominee here we have is The Ten Commandments, which is a film that is the 6th highest grossing movie of all time, adjusted for inflation. A film that very much felt like of the moment, released sort of late in October, actually not late in October, but late in the year in October, I believe early October. But this is a film that I think actually is maybe the most remembered of all these. If you're not sort of in film culture and say, we'll say film Twitter, for example, or say just general listening to podcasts and listening to critics, maybe Giant wouldn't be a film that you really love, but The Ten Commandments, especially growing up in a Catholic school, was always this sort of central movie. It was always shown to us in class during Easter. Sort of this and Ben-Hur are the sort of two religious historical punches that are always shown of this time and of this era. It has a sort of a central, very iconic Charlton Heston performance, which I think is reigns in his best. But this was a very interesting movie because we have missed them for a couple of years. They're more prevalent in the 70s, but these Best Picture nominees that were the highest grossing movies of all time, if you look at the sort of 70s and late 60s episodes, we often see the highest grossing movie of all time getting nominated for Best Picture, whether it be, even genre stuff like a Jaws or like an Exorcist or like Star Wars. They still got nominated because they felt like cultural moments at that time. This one very much a similar situation because it had very little, I think only a single Golden Globe nomination going into Oscar nominations. And then getting that Best Picture winner, the Best Picture nominee, and a bunch of other nominations was sort of a sign that this movie is making a lot of money. People really like this movie. We feel obligated in a lot of ways to nominate it. Despite some of the earlier Critics Awards not really understanding the impact of it at its time. And it definitely influenced a lot of films. Ben-Hur is sort of a similar thing. It started that sort of epic trend in a lot of ways. The market demands were involved with that too, but this one definitely influenced, I think, a lot of them. Maybe directly or not directly, depends. The next nominee here we have is The King and I, which is a musical. I did want to talk about another musical because we just talked about, less than a month ago, The Music Man, so I didn't want to do that again. But this is still sort of a musical. It's kind of been forgotten, but still one that maybe if you're a fan of the Broadway play, you'd recognize, and it is something, sort of a film, so maybe similar to The Music Man in a lot of ways that you sort of just heard tangentially in that sense, and apparently quite good, but from what I know, I've unfortunately not seen it. So that ends up with sort of the final nominee here, which is Friendly Persuasion, which is similar to last week, was sort of positioned as a prestige play from big director William Wyler, who had Roman Holiday, for example. So he had sort of been an established director at this time. And then Gary Cooper, who's coming off of High Noon and Veracruz, so he's an established actor by this point, coming together in a Civil War kind of a movie, which the Oscars have loved the Civil Wars before, whether it be, of course, the large one, Gone with the Wind, or They Die with Their Boots On. So these Civil War epics, in a lot of ways, have been acclaimed and appreciated by the Oscars. So this one definitely felt like this is for the launch, almost in a lot of ways, of the period Oscar movie genre. Even though that existed in the 30s, this is definitely fitting within that mold that we see something today, like The Favorite or whatever, gets nominated, even though it's sort of a strange film, gets nominated because, it's a period piece as well. But I guess we can transition to my thoughts now. I had a bit of a hard time with all the these and the thes, especially right at the beginning, using that sort of colloquial, sort of modern, that sort of Civil War-esque language. They almost overdo it a lot of times. It's comical in certain senses, but aside from that, I think what I enjoy about this film is the heart of its moral dilemma of these pacifists being these Quakers, but then still having that desire to fight for a sense of duty, for a sense of honor. The Quaker religion is a religion of, sometimes can be perceived as sort of like do-nots, restricting yourself from through modern-day technologies, similar to the Amish religion in a lot of ways, or modern-day sort of desires and pleasures, including a fundamental belief of pacifism, which directly contradicts the Civil War that's going on all around them, yet the Quaker community in a lot of ways is sort of staying completely aside from that. And really the film relies on the strength of Gary Cooper playing this man who really just believes in his religion, and then of course the Anthony Perkins, who replace his son, who very much has that sort of young, blooded sort of wanting to fight, wanting to do his duty, wanting to, not insult his family, not insult his religion and his values and his history and his community that he feels so connected to, but also wanting to do something for himself and prove himself and understand that he wants to fight for, what he perceives as a good cause. Sometimes I think the film it is a long film. It's not just those sequences, stuff with the children, these sort of comic aspects sometimes get a little bit out of hand, sometimes feel a little bit unnecessary, even though there's some funny parts with the goose and whatnot. Sometimes it just gets a little bit long in the tooth in that sense, and I would appreciate it if it was a little tighter, a little bit more cut down, but as a sort of incredibly yellow, orange, glistening, romantic view of sort of Civil War era America. I think that the visuals and the two central performances in Gary Cooper and Anthony Perkins ultimately make this a film I enjoyed. But why hasn't this been remembered? I think that Civil War movies, for better or worse, sort of get lumped into a certain type, where Gone with the Wind, for example, has some of these best characters of all time. Scarlett O'Hara, Rhett Butler, are these two sort of intoxicatingly charming and really interesting and complicated characters we've ever seen in film history. Yet there's also sort of these racial stereotypes that existed even in the 30s that are sometimes a hard thing to look past. And in a lot of ways, this is not seen as William Wyler's best. It's not seen as one of the best Civil War movies. So why go back to it in a lot of ways? I think that's what people are struggling with. And as we're continuing to have more and more movies be released, it's harder and harder to go back to these older movies, because not only do they have sort of this glacial pace and sometimes this sort of rigid way of acting, then you have sort of the complications of the sort of racial prejudices and sort of its relationship and relation to race that may be different in terms of the values of today and the outlooks of today that may look antiquated in a lot of ways, despite having these great performances, despite having these great things. And I think actually the central message for this film is actually of pacifism is very much modern in that sense. But unfortunately, I think a lot of these sort of 50s and earlier sort of Civil War movies unfairly sometimes get lumped into these general boxes that are sometimes hard to get out of, and this film sort of does fall into those certain areas, but I think the film's almost not interested in that. But then sometimes you ask, well, it's a Civil War that's intimately involved, so why aren't we talking about that? There are some certain aspects and discussions that are worthy to be had, and I think maybe sometimes that's people struggle when looking back on some of these movies, particularly in regards to the Civil War. But that's about it, guys. I hope you enjoyed the video. Make sure you comment below. Let me know your favorite episode of the Grand Oscar Film Series. If you enjoyed it, I'd love to hear it in the comments down below. And please stay tuned for the Oscar series, because what I do, I predict the Oscars, and I do sort of a long 6-month series where I talk about the Oscars, and I give my predictions of the nominations, and then when the nominations come out, I give my predictions of who I think is going to win. I give all the updated analysis, and I'm really proud of that series, and I'm glad many people watch it as well. So stay tuned for that. That's a lot of fun, and trust me, even if you're not a fan of the Oscars, once you get into the campaigning and the race, it can become very interesting as the race changes and unfolds, and the odds and who's going to win. It can be a lot of fun even if you're not a big Oscar fan, because remember, the Oscars don't mean a lot in the sense that they're not sort of the bearer of this is the best movie of all time and this is the best movie of the year. Sometimes there's just a lot of fun in terms of how the sort of race goes. And a lot of times my favorite movie of the year is not the best picture winner, and that's okay. I still enjoy them nonetheless. But that's it, guys. I hope you enjoyed the video, and until next time, stay tuned.